The Cow, Gāvī Sutta, and Guttara Nikaya 9.35. Suppose there was a mountain cow, foolish, incompetent, unfamiliar with her pasture, unskilled in roaming on rugged mountains, and she were to think, what if I were to go in a direction I have never gone before, to eat grass I have never eaten before, to drink water I have never drunk before? She would lift her hind hoof without having placed her front hoof firmly, and, as a result, she would fall and would not get to go in a direction she had never gone before, to eat grass she had never eaten before, or to drink water she had never drunk before. And, as for the place where she was standing when the thought occurred to her, what if I were to go in a direction I have never gone before, to eat grass I have never eaten before, to drink water I have never drunk before? She would not return there safely. Why is that? Because she is a foolish, incompetent mountain cow, unfamiliar with her pasture, unskilled in roaming on rugged mountains. In the same way, there are cases where a monk, foolish, incompetent, unfamiliar with his pasture, unskilled in being quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, and entering and remaining in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by thought and evaluation, doesn't stick with that theme, doesn't develop it, pursue it, or establish himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the stilling of thought and evaluation, were to enter and remain in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of samadhi, singleness of mind free from thought and evaluation, internal assurance? He is not able, with the stilling of thought and evaluation, to enter and remain in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of samadhi, singleness of mind free from thought and evaluation, internal assurance. The thought occurs to him, what if I, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, were to enter and remain in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by thought and evaluation? He is not able, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, to enter and remain in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by thought and evaluation. This is called the monk who has slipped and fallen from both sides, like the mountain cow, foolish, incompetent, unfamiliar with her pasture, unskilled in roaming on rugged mountains. But suppose there was a mountain cow, wise, competent, familiar with her pasture, skilled in roaming on rugged mountains, and she were to think, what if I were to go in a direction I have never gone before, to eat grass I have never eaten before, to drink water I have never drunk before? She would lift her hind hoof only after having placed her front hoof firmly, and, as a result, would get to go in a direction she had never gone before, to eat grass she had never eaten before, to drink water she had never drunk before. And, as for the place where she was standing when the thought occurred to her, what if I were to go in a direction I have never gone before, to eat grass I have never eaten before, to drink water I have never drunk before? She would return there safely. Why is that? Because she is a wise, competent mountain cow, familiar with her pasture, skilled in roaming on rugged mountains. In the same way, there are cases where a monk, wise, competent, familiar with his pasture, skilled in being quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, and entering and remaining in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by thought and evaluation, sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if, with the stilling of thought and evaluation, I were to enter and remain in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of samadhi, singleness of mind free from thought and evaluation, internal assurance? Without jumping at the second jhana, he, with the stilling of thought and evaluation, enters and remains in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of samadhi, singleness of mind free from thought and evaluation, internal assurance. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the fading of rapture, were to remain equanimous, mindful, and alert, sensing pleasure with the body, thus entering and remaining in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. Without jumping at the third jhana, with the fading of rapture, he remains equanimous, mindful, and alert, and senses pleasure with the body, entering and remaining in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, were to enter and remain in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain, without jumping at the fourth jhana, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, he enters and remains in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the complete transcending of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of resistance, and not attending to perceptions of multiplicity, perceiving infinite space, were to enter and remain in the dimension of the infinitude of space. Without jumping at the dimension of the infinitude of space, he, with the complete transcending of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of resistance, and not attending to perceptions of multiplicity, perceiving infinite space, enters and remains in the dimension of the infinitude of space. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of space, perceiving infinite consciousness, were to enter and remain in the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness? Without jumping at the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, he, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of space, perceiving infinite consciousness, enters and remains in the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, perceiving there is nothing, were to enter and remain in the dimension of nothingness? Without jumping at the dimension of nothingness, he, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, perceiving there is nothing, enters and remains in the dimension of nothingness. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, and establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the complete transcending of the dimension of nothingness, were to enter and remain in the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception? Without jumping at the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, he, with the complete transcending of the dimension of nothingness, enters and remains in the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. He sticks with that theme, develops it, pursues it, establishes himself firmly in it. The thought occurs to him, what if I, with the complete transcending of the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, were to enter and remain in the cessation of perception and feeling? Without jumping at the cessation of perception and feeling, he, with the complete transcending of the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, enters and remains in the cessation of perception and feeling. When a monk enters and emerges from that very attainment, his mind is pliant and malleable. With his pliant, malleable mind, limitless samadhi is well developed. With his well-developed, limitless samadhi, then whichever of the 6 higher knowledges he turns his mind to know and realize, he can witness them for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, he wields manifold supernormal powers. Having been one, he becomes many. Having been many, he becomes one. He appears, he vanishes. He goes unimpeded through walls, ramparts, and mountains, as if through space. He dives in and out of the earth as if it were water. He walks on water without sinking, as if it were dry land. Sitting cross-legged, he flies through the air like a winged bird. With his hand he touches and strokes even the sun and moon, so mighty and powerful. He exercises influence with his body, even as far as the Brahma worlds. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, he hears, by means of the divine ear element, purified and surpassing the human, both kinds of sounds, divine and human, whether near or far. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, he knows the awareness of other beings, other individuals, having encompassed it with his own awareness. He discerns a mind with passion as a mind with passion, and a mind without passion as a mind without passion. He discerns a mind with aversion as a mind with aversion, and a mind without aversion as a mind without aversion. He discerns a mind with delusion as a mind with delusion, and a mind without delusion as a mind without delusion. He discerns a restricted mind as a restricted mind, and a scattered mind as a scattered mind. He discerns an enlarged mind as an enlarged mind, and an unenlarged mind as an unenlarged mind. He discerns a surpassed mind as a surpassed mind, and an unsurpassed mind as an unsurpassed mind. He discerns a mind with samadhi as a mind with samadhi, and a mind without samadhi as a mind without samadhi. He discerns a released mind as a released mind, and an unreleased mind as an unreleased mind. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, he recollects his manifold past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000, many eons of cosmic contraction, many eons of cosmic expansion, many eons of cosmic contraction and expansion, recollecting, there I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose there. There too I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose here. Thus he remembers his manifold past lives in their modes and details. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, he sees, by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, beings passing away and reappearing. He discerns how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. These beings, who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech, and mind, who reviled the noble ones, held wrong views, and undertook actions under the influence of wrong views, with the breakup of the body, after death, have reappeared in a plane of deprivation, a bad destination, a lower realm, hell. But these beings, who were endowed with good conduct of body, speech, and mind, who did not revile the noble ones, who held right views, and undertook actions under the influence of right views, with the breakup of the body, after death, have reappeared in a good destination, a heavenly world. Thus, by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, and he discerns how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening. If he wants, then through the ending of effluence, he enters and remains in the effluent-free awareness release and discernment release, having directly known and realized them for himself right in the here and now. He can witness this for himself whenever there is an opening.